Welcome to the Woman Who Lives podcast.
Hello, good evening. Thank you very much, Tzveti, for joining me today and taking your time out from training and that. So we'll just start then, just by getting you to introduce yourself for everybody that doesn't know you.
Of course, yeah. So hi, everyone. My name is Tzveti, and I am a coach and a pole instructor, and also a competitor as well. So I've been in the fitness industry probably for about like 2 years now. So I'm doing this full time, and I'm also studying at the same time. So I'm doing a master's. But yeah, so for the past 5 years or so, I've just been very involved in powerlifting, lifting in general. Sort of very much moved away from other sports that I used to do that were sort of like very much less like strength sports related. But yeah, that's kind of mainly what I do now, alongside with pole. And then yeah, that's more or less everything you need to know about me.
So when you say other sports, what other sports did you used to do?
So I did do like in general, like overall, I have done quite a lot. So I've done competitive gymnastics. So I did that from the age of about 5 till I was 16. And then at that point, so not really sure why, to be fair, because I was always enjoying it quite a lot, but I just sort of decided to just quit it, because I think when you do something for like quite a long time, especially as like a kid, etc., you sort of reach a point where it just becomes a bit too repetitive. Yeah. Although now I do kind of regret it, because I think it's like an amazing sport. But I finished school and then I moved on to university. So when I went there, I actually did rowing for about 2 years. And then, so as I was rowing, because obviously you've got the option, either you're a rower or you can be a cox. So obviously if you're coxing, you're like directing the row. So I actually ended up getting, you actually get a coxing license. So I got a coxing license. So I was doing a bit of both. But it was quite intense, because obviously when you're in a rowing team, especially if you do any competitions, you're very like tied down. So you need to make all the sessions, because obviously like the other people in the boat rely on you. So eventually ended up moving away from that. Did competitive cheerleading for about a year. If anyone's seen the documentary Cheer on Netflix, watch that, because
yeah, it's class.
Obviously I wasn't at that level, by the way. I'm making it sound like I was literally at their level. I was doing sort of like, there's 6 levels. I was doing like level 3, level 4. So, it was like amazing. That was actually really good fun. And then, so because I was studying languages, so I had like a year abroad where I moved to Spain, and that's where I actually started powerlifting for the first time. Right. Because in the meantime, as well, so I was obviously doing pole from I think my first year of uni, and where I was abroad, and I did go to a few pole studios, but it was sort of like I was enjoying it, but not quite as much. So I thought, maybe while I'm here, I can actually try a different sport. And I knew like a couple of people from uni actually who did do powerlifting. So I thought, I'm just going to Google powerlifting gyms in Madrid, which is where I was at the time. So I Googled that. I messaged one of the gyms. I was like, do you take like complete beginners? And then, yeah, that's basically kind of how it started, because I started going there and then sort of got to grips with it. But yeah, so I've gone through quite a lot of sports, obviously not all of them for ages. I think the longest one was gymnastics, which was for about how many years? Like 11, 12, something like that. And then, yeah, lifting, I guess now for five years roughly.
So you've kind of already built that like core fitness anyway from doing the gymnastics. Like every other sport, kind of like if you do gymnastics, it kind of does revolve around it, because you've got a tight core, you've got a good back, you've got good flexibility, you can get into deadlift and squat positions quite well, so it kind of fits in well with the sport you're doing.
I was quite lucky. I never had issues with that. But obviously what I found quite challenging to begin with when I started lifting was, obviously I could like really easily get into the positions, but I still obviously had to like build up quite a lot of strength. Yeah. So when I first started, obviously like my numbers they were nowhere near like what I do now, but I don't know, I'm trying to remember. I feel like to begin with I was squatting like 30 or something, and then benching like 25, and I think I was then lifting like 60, which to be fair wasn't too bad. But it definitely like didn't feel easy. But I guess at least with squats, I never had to worry about, am I like going low enough and all that fun stuff. Yeah. But yeah, so it helped to actually have like some background, but it's not mandatory. I know a lot of people who've started lifting kind of later on without having like prior sports experience, and they do like incredibly well as well.
Yeah, I think gymnastics fits in quite well with CrossFit. I love watching CrossFit.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody that's top level in CrossFit that I've come across all seem to have a background in like gymnastics.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've noticed that. I guess it's just it's the coordination as well, and just that type of like obviously sort of like overall functional kind of strength almost.
Yeah.
I guess it can benefit most people, to be honest. It's one of those things where like I'm really, really glad that my parents like, well, they didn't force me, they just sort of like asked me if I wanted to do it, and
Yeah.
I feel like it really, really benefited me. But yeah, it's like a great sport.
So when's the powerlifting then? So you were saying you started powerlifting in Madrid. That's where you were firstly, wasn't it? You said you went to Spain for a year's placement. So talk about a wee bit more about that, you know, how you got into it, what you found even being away in a different country, doing a sport. Obviously, I take it Spanish isn't your first language.
No. So obviously I'm Bulgarian, given the
so that would be your third language then, would it?
On Instagram, yeah. Yes, it's quite like almost like a complicated one, as in, so obviously I'm Bulgarian, I was born in Bulgaria, and I moved to Luxembourg purely because my parents got jobs there, and then obviously we all moved when I was about like 11 or 12, so moved there, which means so in total, because like I was always like quite into learning languages anyway, but obviously so when I moved to Luxembourg I had to like, well, I had the basics of French, but I had to like learn French to like a good level so that I could actually like go to school. Yeah. But then obviously, so in the meantime, I was able to like, I picked up Spanish at school as like an extra language, and German as well. But anyway, like I was just really lucky because in terms of where I moved, it was such an international place. Obviously Luxembourg as a country is just quite international. So it's probably like the best place to really learn languages properly because there's a lot of native speakers. So it's one of those things where it's one thing to, you know, learn it from a textbook, but it's also like, it really hits you when you can actually like talk to people. So I didn't find it, you know, when I moved to Madrid, it wasn't like a traumatic experience. Obviously it was different, but like in a really nice way. I think the only thing was I only knew probably like one person or maybe two people who already lived in Madrid when I moved. So I obviously, to begin with, I didn't really have like a lot of people that I could actually hang out with, but then to be fair, so I had like flatmates, so obviously could hang out with them, etc. But in terms of like actually, you know, speaking the language, that was actually okay. What was quite challenging is because obviously, again, it's one thing, like I did have like a good level of Spanish to begin with, but when I started going to that powerlifting gym, so basically to begin with, I went to like a commercial gym and I would just basically just do very, very generic workouts. So, you know, when you go in and you have no idea what your plan is, so you just sort of pick like yeah, you sort of pick some dumbbells. You're like, okay, I'm just gonna think of like any exercise I can do with those dumbbells, do a few sets of each. You don't even necessarily like push yourself to go like heavy, you just sort of pick like a base weight that's easy enough. And basically I just used to do that all the time, and then like a bit of like high intensity stuff at the end, which I don't know why I ever did, it was horrible. But then what I then decided to look into powerlifting purely, as I said, because there were like a few people back from uni, like from Oxford, that were already doing powerlifting, so they kind of encouraged me. And then when I looked into that and when I started going to the powerlifting gym, obviously like all of a sudden it was really challenging because even though, you know, I wasn't necessarily like lifting very heavy, but for the first time I was actually like pushing the weights up slowly. So, you know, even if it was like a 40 kilo squat, like at the time that was like quite heavy. And also obviously the other thing, so that was like the only, I guess, like language barrier, but I was quite like, you know, I was proficient in Spanish, but, you know, you never bothered to actually learn the names of like fitness exercises. So all the time, like, so obviously, because so I think he was one of the owners actually, but also a coach there. So I signed up, etc. But he didn't even need to coach me. He was just being quite nice. But whenever I came in, he'd sort of like give me a rough idea. Oh, you just write it down on a post-it. He was like, just do this as your training session. But I just felt so bad because I would then have to like either Google it or I'd go up to him and I would be like, okay, so can you actually tell me what this exercise means? Because I don't actually know. And to be fair, most of the time you can Google it, but every so often like there's words that aren't necessarily very like common. But yeah, so that was one thing that I didn't really think about, that I didn't actually know what exercises mean in Spanish. Because most of them, like you would think it's just like the English word, but no, they actually have like a different word. Yeah, apart from that, I think it was absolutely like, it was like a great experience. I really enjoyed it. It's just the fact that, especially, it sounds so stupid, but it's just like it's sunny all the time. That's like that.
Madrid's lovely. Yeah, I've been there
That's
myself.
one thing. Yeah, you sort of like don't even think about it. Although I guess where it gets quite where it almost gets a bit too sunny and too hot is pretty much from March onwards. All of a sudden, the temperature goes up so quickly, and you sort of go from, oh, this is sort of like, you know, nice and like lovely weather, to, oh my god, I'm boiling all the time. And to be fair, thank God there's, you know, there's aircon everywhere, you know, thankfully. But at the same time, you know, you walk out of the building or like the flat, etc. As soon as you're out on the road, like all of a sudden you're just like literally just completely like sweating, and then you get into the metro, and all of a sudden there's aircon, so you're freezing, and then you go back out and it's like really hot, and you're just kind of constantly going back and forth from like two like extreme temperatures. But I feel like that's like a very stupid thing to complain about, though. I honestly like really enjoyed just the fact that it was just sunny all the time. Also, because I was working in a school as we were sort of a teaching assistant, but I ended up actually teaching a lot as well. So, which in theory I wasn't really meant to do, but I guess they were just sort of, hopefully they were just feeling confident that I was doing well with that. And also I think they did have like a few, I think they had like a few of the teachers that weren't really available all the time. But what was great about
teaching English?
Yeah, so it was mainly English and then a bit of French. Initially when obviously, because it was like a placement, so when you signed the contract, it was meant to just be English, but like I was saying, so one of the teachers was like absent quite a lot. But yeah, no, so what was great about that actually is like just the 2-hour lunch breaks, which is just like, honestly, it sounds so stupid. Yeah, because that's the thing. So I used to, obviously, where 2 hours is quite a lot, I would like go to like one of the big parks, like obviously Retiro is like one of the biggest parks, but you could even spend like a whole hour just sunbathing if you wanted to, and then you still have a whole other hour to like grab food and just do whatever, which is, you kind of,
their schooling's very different over there too, isn't it? I remember, isn't it, the reason they have the 2-hour break is because it gets so hot, they are allowed to go home. Am I right? And saying that, I think that's what I was told one time.
I mean, in the afternoon, I think it depends on the school. So where I was working, obviously, so you had like a few classes in the morning, but it was a primary school, obviously. So I think with secondary school it's probably a bit different. But they'd have like maybe like 3 classes in the morning, which were usually like 40-45 minutes, and then there was a 2-hour lunch break. And then usually in the afternoon they'd have like 1 or 2 classes, but you still finish pretty early. You finish at like 4 o'clock roughly. And I think occasionally, it depends. I think with like the smaller kids, so first and second grade, they had like a few days where it was shorter, so you'd finish at 1. But as you kind of go up, like in terms of age, it was usually 4 days, I think, like 4 full days, and then 1 shorter day. But yeah, I feel like honestly, in terms of time, that's actually like okay. You do get a lot of free time, even like in terms of like as a student as well. But yeah, like honestly, really enjoyed it. I haven't been back there in the past 2 years, just purely because it's such a hassle to travel right now. But
yeah, tell me about it.
that's good fun.
No, definitely not. And you're in England at the minute, then, I'm assuming.
Yes, Southampton right now. Yes, that's
where you've moved. Yeah, the family's moved to.
No, it's just me. No, my parents. No, my parents are still in Luxembourg. They've been
right,
there.
okay.
Yeah, so when I moved for university, that was just me. That wasn't.
That was you.
Yeah.
Very good. So you had got gold in a recent competition in the All Ireland's got ahead there in my head. I was saying that earlier too about Jenny Money. I was going to say that All England's 21.
Yeah,
so how was your prep leading up to that? Just talk us through like your recovery, nutrition, working with your coach. Obviously you're studying, so like well, when you're a student, you're a bit more flexible with time, I suppose, than what you would be if you're working, although it is a full-time job, but you know what I mean, if you're working full-time hours, getting the training and stuff. And so yeah, work away.
Okay, so I think I'll start with let's start with just sort of like the overall prep, because so to be fair, as you said, although obviously I was studying, so still am nearly done. like two more weeks essentially, and I'm done, fingers crossed. But essentially, so I was doing this part-time, so obviously with the masters for the one that I picked, which is marketing and brand management. If you do it full-time, it's a year. If you do it part-time, it's over the span of 2 years. So it's a lot more spread out. So it's not too bad, I found. And especially, to be fair, over 2022, where from March onwards, everything was online. So it's actually quite easy, because otherwise I was going to have to, because where I'm doing my master's at Oxford Brookes, I would have had to like commute there a few times a week, which, to be fair, I didn't mind. And then in the meantime, so obviously I am working at the barbell division, so the gym where I'm currently at right now. Obviously, so I'm coaching and then teaching pole, but that's obviously, it's very flexible. And, you know, I pick the timetable in terms of my pole classes. Absolutely. So in terms of prepping for the comp, I'm trying to think, because obviously it was last year, it was in August, I think. I don't think I took, obviously it was a couple of months worth of prep, but after obviously the previous year so I did train obviously in 2020 purely because, so obviously myself and my partner, so he co-owns the gym. We were actually doing a lot of renovations in the gym, obviously during lockdowns, etc., because businesses were allowed to actually be on the premise. And we thought, obviously, there's no better time to renovate the gym than when it's closed, because it's a lot harder to do if there's people like training. You can't really section off the whole gym and just be like, okay, we're going to be doing work here. So we were here, you know, like once or twice a week. So I actually did still train, which obviously I was really, really lucky to do. But I found that it was very interesting, because you always think, you know, you can kind of like motivate yourself, etc. But, you know, over like second lockdown, etc., you really lose like, not the motivation, but you just can't really be bothered to train anymore, even if you have the option to do it. And I think that really had a lot to do, because it was literally just like the two of us in the gym, and you're so used to having people here. And, you know, it's just a nicer experience when you can actually, obviously, you can still focus on your training, but, you know, you actually get the social aspect of it as well. And it's a weird one to begin with, you don't notice it. And then as the months go by, it does really like sort of make it a lot less enjoyable. But anyway, so, you know, 2020, so I still trained. So I feel like, you know, I was like in an okay condition to then like start prepping for a comp again. But even so I didn't start like half a year before, because obviously I had to first of all decide that I was going to do the comp. It actually turns out, so with All England's, because I had signed up for it for 2020, but it got cancelled. So you had the option either to obviously just like cancel your entry and get a refund, or just stay on the list. So I just said, just stay on the list and I'll just do it whenever they like get around to doing it. So yeah, when they like released a new date, I was like, oh, okay, right. Okay. So I probably should like start prepping with that. And in terms of the prep, to be fair, so I'd love to say that, you know, it was something like incredibly interesting, but it was just the usual powerlifting prep. So, you know, starting with lots and lots of volume, sort of like slowly kind of building up to like, you know, heavier sets of like 5, and then heavier sets of 3, then some singles. So nothing really like that different there. But it was like, I found it so nice to actually like, even though I hadn't really thought of it, but where I'd spent obviously like a year and a half not competing, it was actually so nice to like start looking forward to a comp again. So that was probably like actually like one of the best parts about it. And yeah, I think I was just really surprised that like once I kind of had like obviously the deadline in mind, in terms of like, you know, I knew when the comp was, it does actually like get you to like take your sessions more seriously. And you're just sort of like a lot more committed, and, you know, just like, you know, when you go through the motions, so you can very much do like a whole session, but you can be just not really engaged in the actual movements, and you're sort of just like doing it to get it done with. So yeah, that was actually like really, really nice to sort of get back into that mindset. And then in terms of, you said, was it nutrition?
Nutrition.
So in terms of nutrition, I'm very much, I haven't counted macros in like a very, very long time, but I'm one of those people. So, well, to begin with, so I'm like, my nutrition is not perfect, but overall, like, you know, most of the time, like 85-90% of the time, I'll eat like decent meals. So I don't really like think about it. I also don't cut out things though. So for me, like daily ice cream, that's a thing. Like, it has to be part of my nutrition. I think, to be fair, also as well though, where I teach pole, and then where I do like my training sessions, and then I'll do my own pole sessions, etc. I just kind of like, I need to be eating like a lot, because otherwise I'll probably lose a lot of weight and just end up just like
like
skin and bones. Yeah. And to begin with, I think one thing that I struggled with at one point, I wanted to, because I'm in the under 47s, and at one point I wanted to bulk up to the 52s, and I just found it really hard because so in terms of like, you know, when I have a meal, I just sort of, I eat as much as I can, but then when I get full, I'm like, oh well, you know, I'm done. Whereas obviously when I was trying to bulk, I was just trying to like just keep eating, and I just found it so hard, which is like, it's a stupid thing to say, but I think, you know, when you're full and you're trying to like have like another half of a plate, it's just it's a lot. And I try a lot of things though, you know, like the usual powerlifter thing where you like down a pint of milk and whatnot, and it kind of, I guess it kind of like vaguely worked, but I never got to like the full 52. I was more like along the lines of 49, which I might as well stay at 47 basically. So
and what age are you? You're what, 21? If you're still at uni, you must be like 21, 22.
I'm a lot older than that actually.
Oh yeah,
I'm nearly 27 in
Jesus.
in 2 weeks time I'll be 27. I do like, it's just one of those things that like I just look relatively young though, so
you do look really young, but I don't blame you. What I was going to say is whenever you're like between the age of 18 and 21, your thyroid is like really active, so like putting on weight, I know I struggled whenever at that age to try and put on a wee bit of weight. Now I don't freaking struggle with it at all. but
it is hard though when you're trying. It's almost as if like it just works the opposite way.
Yeah, because you want to be eating the right things. You don't want to be putting on too much. If you're putting on weight, you want to be putting on the wrong kind of weight too, don't you? Not you want to be building it in muscle and a wee bit of fat, because you need a wee bit of fat if you're burning a lot of energy, especially if you're doing a lot of, like if you're doing pole, then you're doing powerlifting and some strongwoman stuff too. You need quite a lot of fuel to get by.
Yeah, I think it's like, it's only when I started like doing some strongwoman bits, that's when like I really had to commit to like just eating a lot more. Because like if I was doing like a day where I was doing mainly events, oh my god, I'd get halfway through the session, I would be like, okay, I need a break, which I don't usually have with like powerlifting or pole or anything really. But if it was like something quite heavy, I would just be like, okay, no, I need to sit down now. But yeah, so basically all of that to sum up with, for All England's, and to be fair, most comps, I don't really track macros. It's probably like, it's partially to do with laziness, because obviously if you're tracking properly, like you have to dedicate the time to really like just making sure you're weighing
a lot of time.
Yeah, you're weighing everything correctly, etc. But I think, like I was saying, as in, I kind of obviously, like I roughly know anyway how much I need to eat in terms of calories, even if it's not exact. So, you know, when you look at the amount of food roughly in terms of like how much protein, how much carbs, etc. So in my case anyway, like it doesn't need to be exact, but then again, you know, I'm not doing bodybuilding, so it doesn't matter. But I'm like, at least for me, like I'm a firm believer, like I love the fact that I could just sort of, you know, it's one of those things, if I decide, oh, okay, I'm hungry in the middle of the day, like I'm not going to tell myself, oh no, you shouldn't snack. I'll just have the snack, because, well, why wouldn't I? So yeah, nothing too like restrictive at all there. And to be fair, like I was saying, because like I naturally sit around like 47, it's not really an issue either, because I'm not having to massively worry, am I going to make weight or not, which is good. And then recovery wise, so I tend to do that's mainly because of pole, but I do a lot of flexibility and mobility, which obviously it's kind of like goes hand in hand, where I guess the only difference is with mobility, you sort of, a lot of the time you're sort of focusing on just a basic level of mobility. With flexibility, you're kind of trying to like push a bit more. But to be honest, that's probably like the main reason why I feel like I recover quite well from sessions, because I just make sure that in between like lifting sessions, I'm still like actually stretching, but properly. So when I do a session, that's usually like about like an hour of just obviously stretching. So I think that's the main thing. I don't really tend to do much more.
You don't do saunas or cryostats or massages and stuff?
So with saunas, I actually have, so you know the portable saunas that you can have at home, where basically it's this like square, so your head is like outside of it and you can just zip it up. So it's one of these. It's not actually mine, it's my partner's, but he's had it forever and it still works. So I do that occasionally. It's quite like a funny one, because obviously, so you're just sat on like a small chair inside it and you zip yourself up. But then you just have to kind of commit. You can't really move, or you can't. So if you have your hands outside of it, you're letting hot air out. So you sort of have to be like, you're just like this for, you know, however long, like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So yeah, I do that occasionally. I think, to be honest, last time I did it, that was actually just to like cut like a tiny bit of water weight before a comp. It was like this January actually, but apart from that, every so often, like I do use it and it's like really nice. But I think I just get quite restless in terms of like, because you just have to be so still, like you can't really move around much. And then also because we've got 2 cats and one of the cats really loves to like jump on your face while you're, you know, while you can't even get rid of them because
get it out of the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Siamese cats you have? Has it? I seen it? Is it Siamese cats?
No, they're Sphinx cats. So
I thought I seen a Siamese.
I think the Siamese ones are like, what do they look like? I know exactly which ones they are, but I'll have to Google it. But yeah, the ones that we've got there, Sphinx cats, so hairless ones. But yeah, so that's the thing though, because obviously they can like feel that the sauna's really hot, so they actually kind of want to like try and jump inside, but obviously I don't think that would go down too well for them.
And is your partner your coach, or have you got a set, like if you got a different coach for your powerlifting?
So he is actually my coach. He has been for about like 2.5 years now, maybe 3 years. It was just sort of it was kind of an interesting one. So to begin with, actually, when we first started talking, etc., he offered to coach me, and at the time I was coaching myself, so I kind of thought, oh, why not? So yeah, that's sort of how it started. And then so at the time we weren't together at all, and it was sort of like later on that we ended up obviously kind of actually being in a relationship. But yeah, honestly, like it's one of those things where I've never felt the need to actually switch coaches, because, well, it's one of those things, especially as well, like the more you work with someone, the better their knowledge in terms of how you work and what works best for you. I think if anything though, obviously, like I've got nothing negative to say about his programming, but I think I do make it quite hard for him, because obviously I do a lot of different sports, and then obviously, especially like last year, I suddenly decided, oh, do you know what, I want to like add Strongwoman to that. You know, like, oh god, like can you just stick to one thing, and that just makes my life easier.
So is he solely powerlifting, or just like, is that what he would specialize in, or just like strength and conditioning?
A bit of both now. So essentially, so he's been powerlifting, I guess, for roughly the same amount as me, maybe a tiny bit longer, I think. But he's actually, he's like, I would say like a much higher level than me. So he's been to Commonwealths and World. He's definitely been to Worlds. So that's like in the IPF again. Yeah. And up until I think it was like a couple of years ago, he had a couple of British records for the under 50s, 59s. But also, so last year he actually did a bit of strongman as well. So he did static monsters, and actually ended up getting like the world records in that as well.
Class.
It was pretty good. It was in the under 80s, which obviously he's like, well, at the moment, so he's no longer under 59 at all, because obviously ever since then he's like actually put on like a bit more muscle and just weight in general. But yeah, obviously with strongman, where there's not like a under 70 option anyway. Yeah. So I think, well, given the fact that he was like probably like the lightest there, it was very impressive that he obviously did like ridiculously well. But I think his focus is really like powerlifting still. So yeah, he's definitely like more into that. But in terms of his coaching, he has actually, so he's kind of branched out into working with athletes that aren't necessarily strength sports athletes. So for instance, he's got one client of his who I think he's currently competing in, it's boxing actually. Yeah. So he's got a boxing client, and then he's also got a few clients that also do jiu-jitsu. So he kind of programs for them. So obviously maintaining the strength aspect of it, but he's also ensuring that it benefits their training as well.
Sport, yeah.
But yeah, in terms of what he does, obviously he's like primarily, you know, strength sport, powerlifting, and then I guess like as well strongman as well. So yeah.
Cool. So what is your best part about competing? What do you love most about the powerlifting, competing in powerlifting?
That's actually a good question. I have to think about that. I think it sort of changed as time went on. So for instance, when I first started competing, like the very first comp I did, so you know how I said obviously I started doing powerlifting in that gym in Madrid. So as it turns out, they were hosting like a national comp, which is a push and pull comp there, and it was only like a couple of months after I started, and I just sort of decided, even though I was only allowed as a guest lifter, because obviously I'm not Spanish, I actually decided to enter it. I was like, oh, do you know what? It'll be like a bit of fun. So that one was really fun purely because obviously, I was like competing with people from that gym that I already knew. But also just the atmosphere was like just so ridiculously just quite like encouraging, very friendly. Everyone was like just cheering absolutely everyone on, which I guess to be fair, like you get that with like most powerlifting comps, especially as well, whether it's like regional level, like I guess to be honest, like less so at like the bigger comps I've noticed. So I'll probably get to that later on. But last year, obviously, I did All England. I also did British Nationals, which obviously is the bigger one. Ended up 4th in that one, but I actually didn't have a great time just because I think I put too much pressure on myself. I was so committed. I really wanted to get, you know, somewhere in the top 3. Obviously I kind of thought I'm probably not going to get first, but I kind of wanted at least 2nd or 3rd, which I didn't get. And then I was like, oh, well, great. But it wasn't so much, it wasn't necessarily that in terms of, you know, I was like a bit disappointed with how I performed, but also it was like a very intense atmosphere. So because everyone who was there, by definition, because like the qualifying totals are a bit high, it's like it's a more competitive comp. But it's just like in the warm-up area, it was just very, very intense. Like everyone was clearly just kind of very tunnel vision on like their own thing. Whereas with slightly smaller comps, so even though All England is still a national comp, but I guess it's like right below British. And that was just so much nicer because I actually ended up like I had the time to, you know, chat to lifters that I didn't know. I actually like got to kind of, I guess, you know, you make new friends while you're there. And it's just a lot more relaxed. So, you know, because obviously the British Nationals, obviously, that was just very much like you're just so committed to like what you're lifting. It almost becomes like not enjoyable because you're quite nervous. You're stressed. You're also like, you keep looking at what numbers they're putting up and you're like calculating, okay, what total do I need to like get whatever place? And it just becomes a bit, too much. Whereas, I think with the smaller ones, and obviously, so we actually hosted one here at the barbell division in January, which was just like a small divisional comp. Well, I guess I say small, we still had like 60 lifters, which was really good. But that was probably like, I think divisional comps are usually the best because everyone is like obviously a lot less committed to like just winning at all costs, and they're more, you know, just here to like do their best and also like enjoy the day with like other people. So I think it does make a difference in terms of but so to go back to like what I really like about competing, is just probably actually like, obviously, you know, I'd love to like PB and actually hit some decent numbers, but also just kind of having fun with it, especially as well, watching others lift and like really kind of really getting like really rooting for them, really wanting to like make sure they do well as well. That's probably like the main thing actually.
And where's the farthest you've traveled so far for a competition?
So what was that?
Where's the farthest you've traveled so far for a competition?
Well, actually, it was probably the British last year, so it was, well, only to Manchester, but it took about 6 hours from Southampton. So that was a very long drive. I think that's partially not that I'm not one to like, I'm not going to blame that for, you know, not like getting the lifts I wanted, but I think it's just because I ended up, well, it was meant to be a lot less than that, but it was a Friday. So it was just sort of endless traffic jams. So 6 hours in the car, that really took it out of me because I was like,
was that your first like big competition outside of All England? Like, you know, was that your first? For me, for Strongwoman, it would be like my first one would be like Ireland's Strongest Woman. So, but that had been one of your first big competitions. Yeah,
actually, because before that, even though over the past couple of years, like I did like quite a few. So for instance, when I was still at uni, I did like the British University Championships and stuff like that, which are they're national comps, but it's, you know, like the levels obviously a lot like lower. So that would have actually been like the first kind of like bigger one. But like it was just like a very long drive. And then obviously, because we didn't factor that in, so we got there and then we got to the hotel and stuff, and all of a sudden it was, you know, it was like 6 or 7 p.m. and I was like, oh my God, okay. We need to have time to pretty much, you know, just like have some food and then go to sleep, and all of a sudden you wake up and you have to like go to the venue, and it was just whereas All England's was obviously a lot closer. It was I think it was Northampton, and that's only like 2 hours away. So, you know, we literally just left in the morning, and that's I feel like that's like a lot easier.
And what did you learn in comparison to the one in Northampton, like going to Manchester? What did you learn that you wouldn't do again, you know, in prep, going down if you were going somewhere that far?
Yeah, so it was definitely like the two main things were, first of all, so because last year, you know, post-COVID, etc., they moved the dates around quite a lot. So normally there would be a lot more time between All Englands and Brits. And it was 2 weeks apart. So obviously I did All Englands first. And even though, so I didn't really like max out. I went for like decent numbers, but sort of numbers that I know I can do. And it didn't really feel like, obviously, clearly, like I hadn't maxed out. But I think where the two comps were so close together, when I then went on to do the British, I feel like that's why, because I was planning on maxing out at that one, and I didn't, because clearly fatigue levels were just not.
Yeah.
But it was probably that. But as I said, like the main thing is I'd probably go that 2 days before, just purely because, like, to account for the drive, or like maybe because obviously I was going there with my partner, but he didn't actually he didn't drive any of the way. So I think like 6 hours was like a bit much for me. I was like getting a bit restless. So yeah, literally just going there like a bit earlier. If you know it's far away, you just need to give it like an extra, you know, maybe like half a day or whatever. Yeah. I think that's the main things. Yeah, like just making sure you're not fatigued, because even though I think I didn't realize at the time, but then like when I obviously, especially like when you're in the lightest categories, you always weigh in like quite early in the morning. So literally you have to like, again, you wake up like 6:30, something like that. And then, you know, you get there and then you have to wait around until they like start weighing you in, etc. And that also tires you out, because obviously, say if you're like lifting in the afternoon, you get to like sleep in all morning if you wanted to. It doesn't make a difference. But yeah, those two things definitely.
Cool. So how do your your parents find, like, do they enjoy you lifting, like, or are they old school, you know, women shouldn't be lifting, or how do they find it?
Well, so I think it's kind of a weird one. Like, I'll be honest, they don't like love it, but now they're sort of like they're fine with it, but I don't think they get the appeal. So for instance, like on one side, so my mum's not really like into sports or training at all. And then, well, actually my dad is like, he was a competitive wrestler to like a pretty high level. But obviously for him, where like he was always like just very much focused on wrestling. Yeah, he doesn't really quite get the appeal of lifting heavy, etc. And I think as well, well, that's where the whole like different generation thing comes in. They also like there's always like the fear that like, oh my god, because if they look at a video of me lifting, you know, say like something that's like RP 9.5, obviously you move slow, but you know, when you're in the strength sports kind of like sphere, you know that that's normal. Whereas for them, they're like, oh my god, you're literally going to break your back. What are you doing? Like, it shouldn't. And obviously they don't really understand that, you know, if you're going to push yourself quite a lot, then it's not going to move quickly, obviously. But yeah, no, honestly, they're okay with it. And to be fair, like, I don't really mind, because it's one of those things where, you know, they don't necessarily like bring it up all the time. And I think every so often, to be fair, like my mom used to have like a massive issue with me having arm muscle. She was like, no, oh my god, look at, like, you've got biceps and everything, it's horrible. And I was like, I don't really see it. Like, and also I probably don't have, like, that's the thing though, I have like big tricep and I have no biceps whatsoever. So I was a bit like, I don't know why you're seeing this, but okay. But yeah, it's just like a generational thing. But yeah, you know, they don't have an issue with it now, especially now it's been like quite a few years and they're just sort of like fine with it.
It's funny, like my dad gets it, my mum doesn't quite, but do you know who really gets it is my granddad.
Oh really?
My granddad is my biggest cheerleader.
That's actually
so he totally gets it. He just loves, he's seen me lifting stones, you know, the Atlas stones.
Yeah.
One time, and he was like my sister sent me a video of him cheering me on in the video. It was like quite cute. So as well as powerlifting, you're also an IPF divisional referee. So how did you get into, why did you want to be a referee, and how did you get into it?
So essentially, it's an interesting one, because actually when you said like, why did you want to be a referee, I honestly, I kind of thought to myself, I was like, I don't really know. But basically, the way it happened was, I'm trying to think whether it was before. I think it was before all the lockdowns, actually. So it would have been end of 2019. At which point, like, I'd already moved to Southampton, and essentially, we were just thinking, because one of the problems, and I don't know if that's the case with Strongwoman, maybe it's not, but I guess, to be fair, the problem with powerlifting, and especially with the IPF, is like you can't just ask anyone to ref. It has to be someone who actually did the ref course, who passed it, and who's like allowed to ref. And the thing is, obviously, you have, it's kind of like sectioned off into regions, you know, the usual like South Midlands, Southwest, Southeast, etc. But there's actually not that many refs. So whenever there's a comp happening, there's always like a shortage of like, oh, who are we gonna, like, we need to find people to ref, and there's not that many. So it's partially because of that. And we thought, obviously, I looked into it. So I can't remember who I emailed, but I emailed someone from British Powerlifting, and I was asking, oh, what do you really need to like organize a ref course? Because we wanted to just do it here at the gym. And they kind of explained roughly, and they said, you know, you need to have like a minimum number of people and this and that, and you have to have a national, I think it's like level 2 British powerlifting ref who like oversees it, which I did find that was weird. So obviously, because realistically, all you have to do is, you know, you hand out the papers, and then, you know, you just look at people do the exam. So I did find that strange. You had to have like a specific like ref to do that. But anyway, so I was like in touch with South Midlands, so as in like the South Midlands Federation here, and they kind of obviously they agreed to do it. So they found a national ref that obviously fit the criteria. And then in the meantime, obviously, we had to just do some generic stuff, like, you know, get like desks and chairs and stuff, obviously, so that people could take the exam. And then we advertised for that. Got like, I think we got around 10-15 people who came to do it. And essentially, yeah, so it was one of those things where, obviously, like I was saying, so it's quite like a detailed exam. So you really, really need to kind of like memorize pretty much everything that's in the IPF handbook. So we're talking very, very small details, including, you know, the length of a belt in terms of obviously what's like acceptable for a comp. So the width of it, the distance between the buckle and the end of the belt, and like the obviously like pretty much anything, any dimensions you have to know by heart. And that's like on top of obviously the usual actual, like, you know, what you need to rep. So in terms of knowing what's a valid lift, what's not. And that's weirdly, like, you don't realize, but once again, that's usually, it's like a full-on table with quite a lot of description. But essentially, as long as you memorize all of it and then go do the exam, just put all the information down. I find that a lot of the time with these things, if you make sure you revise sort of like 1 or 2 days before, it's still really fresh in your mind.
Yeah.
So you don't tend to forget it quite as much. And then, yeah, so basically, yeah, I just held it here. I think, I can't remember, but you have to get quite a high percentage to pass. So obviously, if you make too many mistakes, like, you have to retake it. I don't think I think one person had to retake it out of everyone who came here. So that was like quite good numbers. And yeah, that's basically how it happened. And then from there, obviously, you just have to wait. You receive like, it's just a small parcel. So you get like a tie with the logo, and then you've got like a blazer, because there's like a uniform that you have to wear.
Yeah, you have to look the part.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like you have to look like presentable. But yeah, it's pretty much that. You get like your certificate. It's just like straightforward, you know, like specifies that you're a divisional ref, etc. And then from there, you're allowed to ref. So obviously, then it's up to you to kind of decide when there's a comp nearby, you can just go and do that. And then, yeah, I think it's one of those things where I just thought as well, what's really strange to me in powerlifting anyway, is up until recently, there weren't that many younger refs. So I think most of the refs were sort of, I'd say like 40, 50 plus years old, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I did find it strange. I kind of thought, why is there no, 20 something year old people?
Especially when there's quite a lot of young people doing it at the minute.
Oh, yeah.
You would expect some of the referees to be quite young as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. I found it really strange, and I was just sort of wondering, because there's tons of relatively young lifters, obviously, but then within like sort of like the refs, it was very much sort of like different demographic in terms of age. So I kind of thought, do you know what, it would be nice to actually like have younger refs, not necessarily because they would be better or anything, but I think in a way, obviously, when you're still like actively lifting as well, and it might be like as well one of those things where I have found that sometimes some of like the slightly older refs tend to be a lot stricter as well, to the point where sometimes it's almost like, it almost feels a bit unnecessary. They'll be like very, very strict. So we're talking, you know, with like a bench press pause, they'll literally take like 3 seconds to say press, and it can be quite, I think it can be quite discouraging, obviously, for certain lifters. If, you know, imagine you're doing your first comp and then you go to do your bench and they literally make you like hold it there for like 3 seconds on your chest, which is just very, like, very traumatic.
Yeah.
That's kind of the reasoning behind it. And then obviously as I started doing it, like, it is really good fun. Obviously it's quite nice to do it when it's not just 3 people, because what can happen, like, say if you're doing like a whole day worth of reffing, it actually, obviously it gets very repetitive after a while. So you really need to you need to pay attention, because it's very easy, like after a couple of like, say you've done squats and like you've gone onto bench and like it's getting to deadlifts, but you know, you'll have usually like several flights of people, and it can be up to like 30 people in the morning, 30 people in the afternoon. So your attention, obviously, like at some point it will start to go, and that's not what you want really. You want to be like fully involved in what people are doing.
You really do have to have a good attention span for that, don't you?
Oh yeah, for sure. But to be fair, obviously in powerlifting you always have 3 refs. But what I mean is, like, normally, like in an ideal world, over like one day you'd have like 6, so you can switch in and out, just so you can get a bit of a break and then kind of come back to it. But yeah, it has been like really nice. Obviously, so the comp that we organized here last month, I was a bit too ambitious, so I ended up, because I competed in it and then I also organized it, and then I also refed in the afternoon, and I'm never doing that again, because it's one of those things where, you know, you love to think that you can like multitask and you can kind of do it all like in one go, etc. But I was genuinely struggling, like, obviously not only like, so for instance, like the night before, I had to like cut a bit of water weight, and then obviously you're like constantly stressing, because like, is everything ready? Like the platform's ready, like, is this ready? Like, we have the wristbands, do we have this, do we have that? And then obviously we had to get up really, really early to like come here and just finish setting up. And then the people were coming in, and then like, it was, yeah.
And they're probably asking you like a million questions, and you were trying to prepare for lifting, and
it was a lot, honestly. Like it sounded really good on paper, but then like in real life it was so chaotic. I was just, I was all over the place. But to be fair, like, I am really glad though, because we had some of our clients competing as well, and they did really well. So that was like great to see. And also,
you're
like,
actually doing 4 jobs, because you're probably coaching as well.
Yeah, to be fair, like, it was sort of like, it was kind of like shared between me and my partner, so he was like kind of taking over, doing more of the handling, especially because in the afternoon I ended up, because a couple of refs pulled out, so we were kind of like short on people. I actually had to like ask someone who did it in the morning to like stay in the afternoon, which I felt really bad about, but I ended up just kind of doing the whole afternoon, which ends up like, it kind of feels like a long time, even though it's only like about 3-4 hours. But yeah, you sort of like, you just get like, especially where I hadn't like slept a lot, so I was just like, okay, I need to pay attention to what they're doing. Like, this is actually like a comp. But yeah, like it was a really fun one. I think everyone had a great time, but I think it was a bit too ambitious to like do 3 things at once, and yeah, not doing that again.
But you have to do these things to learn how to.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's great. You're really eager. You love doing it. But then you have to at some stage like think and take a step back and choose between coaching, reffing, or competing.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, don't get me wrong, like over the span, say like you've got 1 year, you can obviously do it, like, you know, you can ref one comp and then like a few months later you can compete another one. But definitely, like, if you're doing it all like in one day or in one weekend, it's just a lot. I think especially like as well, people don't always necessarily like realize that when you're organizing a comp, there's so many things to think about. Like, even like, so for instance, because we were especially like, so for British powerlifting, etc., there's like very specific dimensions for like the platform and all sorts of different things. So we actually like built a platform, because the ones that we have here, they're not actually comp, they're not comp spec. So literally like the day before, we were just there like putting like plywood together and like just doing the whole thing, and it's just like a lot.
Wow. Well, that actually kind of answers the following question. I was going to ask, how do you find refereeing to competing? But you kind of answered that anyway in it, so that's grand. that's all my questions for that side of things. I want to get into then the pole dance and the instructor. And that, so is it when did you say you've been doing that for a few years now as well, haven't you?
Yeah, so I started in first year of uni, so that would have been, I think, like 2015, something like that. And it was literally just one of those things where it was a friend of mine who was already going to the studio in Oxford, and she said, "Oh, honestly, like, come along, because if you've done gymnastics before, you're gonna like absolutely love this." And it was one of those things, like, I literally showed up to that class, and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna be doing this every single week." Like, there was no question there, and it was like, to be fair, it has a lot to do as well. If you get like a really bad instructor, like, you're not gonna have a great time. But Natalie, who was the owner of the studio, and she was also the instructor there, she was just one of those people who's just incredibly welcoming, and just really, really kind of also like really makes it fun, because that's another thing. So with certain places, when it gets to the point where you're too concerned with obviously perfect form and like making sure, because especially like pole dancing is all about aesthetics, so you want to make moves look pretty. Whereas I feel like with lifting it's less so. It's like you just want to lift heavy shit, you don't care about how it looks.
Yeah, your lifting face is never.
But yeah, with pole, like when people and instructors, when they get to, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, there must be a wee delay.
Oh yeah, I think it's because like there was like a slight problem with the connection on my end, probably. But yeah, so I think with pole, sometimes when certain instructors are a bit too intense, like, it takes the fun out of things, because when people start off pole, or even if they've been doing it for a while, like, you still want it to be fun. Obviously, you want to challenge yourself and like learn new moves and sort of like progress. But at no point should you feel like it's just you go in and it's just sort of like a military boot camp. And yeah, but essentially, like, the studio that I started going at was definitely not like that at all. And it was just like literally every single session was just like so much fun. You kind of, if anything, you sort of wanted to just like go there like every single day. But obviously, like, you would end up like kind of running out of money eventually.
Is it expensive? Is it expensive to get into?
So I think most places, most pole studios would charge like £10-15 per class. But a lot of the times, for instance, and that's the case, like in my studio. So if you sign up for a membership, obviously you can get like, it gets reduced quite a lot. So it just depends. I would say as well, very much dependent on the country as well, because I'd say in the UK it's quite affordable. For instance, in France, it's ridiculously expensive. Like, it's one of those things almost, I don't know who can afford it, really. And I don't quite know why. It might be, to be fair, because I guess in France, maybe like it might have to do with how much they pay in terms of like rent and whatnot. So I'm sure there must be everything behind the prices. But yeah, certain countries, or for instance, like Luxembourg, where my parents live, I've been to like a few studios. Actually, I think it was like only 2 studios, but they were quite expensive as well. So I'd say like the UK is actually quite good with in terms of like prices for the classes. But yeah, so like that's how I started, as in just went over with a friend, and I really, really enjoyed it. So I was just sort of going weekly.
No, I've lost all train of thought there. What have I got there?
I think it was about how I started.
No, well, I think you kind of really answered that one. I was going to say, how did you find like stigma around pole? If anybody had asked you, if you'd mentioned to anybody you were doing pole dancing, what was their initial reaction? Even your parents, like, what was their reaction?
So they didn't actually, weirdly, like, my parents didn't really have a problem with it at all. I think it was one of those things where, like, I think they were like a lot more concerned about the lifting than they were about pole dancing. But I think, to be fair, it's just a really weird one, because so first of all, like, I've never really had like any negative reactions, but I absolutely know like tons and tons of pole dancers who have, whether it's people they know, or like just random strangers like online or even in person, to be honest. I think that's the worst though, because say for instance, if it's in like a professional setting or whatever, and like one of your colleagues is just being clearly just sort of like playing devil's advocate and just making comments, but you can't exactly like retaliate that much. But no, I haven't really had to deal with that. I think probably because I guess, like, especially where I was still at uni, like, I mean, I'd say most, like, not to generalize, but I feel like, you know, when people are at uni, like, no one's really that sort of closed-minded when it comes to these
Yeah, I
things. And
think
like,
most people who go to university are quite open-minded
yeah, and I
anyway.
think it's like probably like an age thing as well, because obviously, I guess to be fair, you know, most people like in their 20s, etc., by now realize that pole dancing is, you know, like just a sport
More than
or
just a strip club type
yeah,
thing.
I mean, like you can make of it what you want, because essentially, so with pole, like there's kind of different types of pole, I suppose you can call it. Like there's what you would call pole dance. So basically, normally pole dance is partially like tricks on the pole. I guess when I say tricks, that's like moves, but that's what you tend to call them. And there's like the choreography aspect of it, so it'll be like spins and maybe a bit of floor work, etc. And in that same sort of like genre, so you can sort of do, because you can kind of, like I was saying, you can turn it into what you want. So if you want to make it quite sexy, you can, or if you want to make it just sort of look pretty, but in like, I guess in like a less like sexual way, you can do that as well. Or there's also, not that, like, I'm not really a fan of like the name, but like pole fitness, which is supposedly just about like conditioning and strength. But the reason why I'm not a huge fan of the pole fitness thing is because a lot of people who say they do pole fitness usually tend to do pole dance, but they seem to be, I think they're very much afraid of being labeled as strippers, so they feel the need to like add fitness there so that it sounds more legitimate, you know.
Yeah,
that's like a whole thing within the industry, because sometimes, you know, especially I think like with beginner pole dancers, and they don't, I guess people don't know any better, but they'll start doing pole and maybe they'll start posting on their account, and they'll post something and then they'll like hashtag not a stripper, and actually that's really problematic, because there's nothing wrong with strippers. And also obviously like one thing, and you know, it's like you can spin it however you want, but the pole that we do in like most pole studios, in terms of like the actual physical pole, that's literally that's the type of pole that came from strip clubs. So because you're kind of, it's like an idea that comes around very often. So people will try and say, oh no, the pole comes from India, and obviously there is like, it's like a wooden pole, it's like a completely different discipline basically. But realistically, like if you're using like a metal chrome pole, that's a strip pole. So there's no point in being like, oh my God, no, but like I would never. And like, but that's the thing though. So when you go to a pole class, no, you don't strip, but also you shouldn't put down strippers, because they're literally kind of the reason why this whole thing exists. So
and I mean, like, I've been, as I was saying before we recorded, I've been on a pole several times in nightclubs. Not that I was probably any good at it, but I had tried my best.
But the thing is that, like, as well, that's one thing that I really like about it, is like, it is just like a lot of fun. And a lot of the time, if you want to do pole, like, so that's why I tend to remind people when they first start off that don't kind of like put all these sort of like goals and expectations on the table, just because you'll get too wrapped up in like, oh, I need to get this move and then this move and then this move. Because sometimes, like, say if I'm doing my own training, like sometimes I'll just literally just put like a song, just like a random song, and just do some freestyling, and that's like just as enjoyable as doing really like advanced moves. But yeah, so that's what I really love about it. But yeah, definitely not a fan of like the stripper shaming, because like I was saying, it just says a lot about the person more so than it does about pole as like sport or as an industry. Or
What would you say to somebody like me who would like to try pole, but I'm more afraid of the bar falling with my weight? Now I know it's probably most, like, they're always fixed in place, like between the roof and the floor, but just with me being a bigger girl, what would you say, you know, to somebody watching maybe that would like to try it, that isn't on, like, that would be curvy, or like myself, big boned, I always say, big boned and muscular.
It's like, honestly, 100% not an issue, because like I was saying, so as long as you've got decent quality poles, which, you know, most studios will do anyway, they're built to be used. So there's no way, you're never going to be able to break it. You also, like, it doesn't matter what your weight is really. Like the whole point is like they're meant to like stay up there. So that's definitely like, that's 100% not a concern. And like I have heard that a lot, because obviously whenever I get messages on my studio page or even my private page. So people like will inevitably, it's kind of like the most common sentence where it's like, oh, I'd love to try, but like I don't think the pole will hold me up. But honestly, 100% a myth, as in poles are very, very like stable. And a lot of the time, so I've like mentioned this quite a few times, but so you can do routines with like 2 people, even like 3 people on the pole at the same time. Yeah. So like if you can hold up 3 people, even if they're like, say like average weight, then definitely they can hold like any weight really. So it's not the type of sport, and like I think it is slowly changing, but there is like plus size pole dancers anyway. I think it's one of those things where they're slowly like more and more, because I guess to begin with, whether it was intentional or not, I guess some pole dancers are like sort of like they kind of fit the typical description where they're like a bit smaller and like a bit lighter, etc. But it shouldn't be the case anyway. And it's really good to see that actually, like I think like as the years go by, there's like just more and more, and like not even necessarily just plus size, but also just people like of all like shapes and sizes, and also like a lot of different backgrounds in terms of some people have like never done any type of sport before. And obviously on the other extreme, there'll be people who've like done like quite a lot of different sports, etc. But it's becoming like a lot more accessible, which is like really, really great to see. But anyway, long story short, like honestly, just go to a beginner class and like I promise you'll have like a great time.
So if I was, sorry, say that again.
I was saying, and like there's literally like no way the pole will like move or fall or
That's good to know. There is somewhere in close by that does pole. She's actually was a cheerleader and then she broke her leg. So part of her recovery, because she couldn't really get on her legs, she started doing a bit more pole. And she's a pole instructor now as well. So I might actually try that out. Now, you know what? It just takes sometimes a bit of reassuring that you're not going to break the pole or fall off the pole. Well, you probably will fall off the pole. Like that's probably a given when you're a beginner, but the pole's not going to fall on top of you.
But the thing is, that's like in terms of like falling off the pole, like that's irrespective of weight, like that happens to everyone.
Yeah.
So that's like pretty normal.
What and as long as oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like the thing is, as long as you've got like an instructor who can actually teach beginners, then you'll be absolutely fine.
What would kind of like in like a summary of like a couple of minutes, what would you teach me as coming in through the door? What would I first have to learn?
So for first lesson, like a lot of the time you literally start off with, so it's like a few basic spins, and normally, so for a basic spin, you'll have both hands on the pole, and then usually like at least like one leg like grip point, or obviously two legs on the pole. So in between, normally like when you distribute it over like, you know, both hands plus like legs, it's like a lot easier than obviously when you move on later on, you'll have like one-handed spins, etc. So just like a couple of spins, there's like a few, so it's like there's a spin called back hook spin, where once again you've still got both hands on the pole, and then you've even got like a leg hook, so you're kind of hooking with the back of your knee essentially, so the crease at the back of your knee. So it's just like, it's a lot of moves that have like a lot of like points of contact with the pole, because obviously the more you like grip onto it, the safer it feels. And you can then like, obviously as time goes on, you'll progress to like fewer grip points, etc. So that's like one of the main ones. Other one is a pole set. So literally like you've got the pole in front of you, and then all you do is, so you'll bring your legs in front. I could probably demonstrate because I've got the poles here. I don't know if you want me to. I'm not going to bother. But essentially, so
we can do that in another podcast.
Yeah, there we go. But anyway, so long story short, like it literally is like what it sounds like. So when you sit on the pole, you just like cross your legs over in front. So like as if you're sat down and just crossing one leg over the other. And you're basically gripping with your thighs. But when you first teach it for beginners, you'll keep your hands on the pole again. And then when you feel confident, you can let go with your hands. And then I usually start to like kind of work through the basics of like how to start climbing. So sometimes it depends on the student. So if people are like doing really, really well and finding everything easy, I teach the full climb, but if not, I sort of like go through the first like 2 stages. That's usually, like, to be fair, it's one of those things where even though it's like an hour session, goes by really quickly. So you don't cover lots and lots of moves. Usually you stick to like 3 or 4. And that's like quite like a good amount to start with. But yeah, basic spins, sit on the pole, and then potentially climb depending on how it goes.
Sounds fun. So The next thing I have on the agenda for questions is the strong woman. So what really got you into strong woman?
So I don't really know. I think it's obviously purely like because so the gym that I train at obviously and that I work at, so it's very much like geared towards powerlifters and strongmen. And obviously, so by the way, so my partner co-owned it with Aaron Page.
Aaron Page, yes, I've seen that on your Instagram there, yeah.
So obviously as well, it's one of those things where like it's almost like it's quite sad because obviously when Aaron was still around, I didn't actually like ever. I think we did like one log session together. That was like about it. But at the time, I wasn't like too interested, to be honest. So it's like it's kind of like a shame that I didn't actually like get into it like earlier on. But yeah, so I think it's mainly because so it was it would have been sort of like around the time when I first when I started prepping for All Englands and Brits, etc. But in the meantime, I did see the athlete movement also in Hampshire, like was organizing Hampshire Strongest Man/Woman, and there was like a novice category. I don't know, I just kind of like read through the description and I was like, oh, I feel like I could try that. At the time I'd only done log, I think once or twice, but as like a one-off session, and it wasn't like, it's one of those things where obviously 2 sessions are not really enough for you to like do it properly. Yeah, it was kind of like a spur of the moment thing. I was like, oh, do you know what, I'm going to sign up. So yeah, like I signed up, and obviously like as soon as I was done with the British in Manchester, because that was beginning of September, so I had about like a month to prep for the novice comp, which was beginning of October. But I really went full on with it, as in, so like literally as soon as I was done with All Englands and the British, obviously like, well, my partner like was programming for me, of course. So literally all I was doing was just like pretty much just the events for the comp. And to be fair, so the actual comp in itself, like I had like an amazing time. I just think like as soon as I started doing Strongwoman, I was like, oh my God, this is like, there's so much variation. And, you know, you're not just doing squat, bench and deadlift every single day. And it's like a lot more fun, isn't it? And then as well, like even though it wasn't in the comp, I started doing stones as well. I was like, this is so much fun. I love it. I think it is just purely, even though like I do love lifting and, you know, powerlifting as well, but it is just very repetitive. You know, you literally every single comp, you're going to do the exact same thing. Like, you know how it is. And yeah, there's not a lot of like, you know, it doesn't change much. Whereas with Strongman and Strongwoman, like every single comp will have like different events on it.
Yeah, something different.
Yeah, so I started doing that. I think like the main challenge was because obviously there was like a log ladder for the comp, and at the time, because obviously in the gym here we have like a small log which is 28 kilos, and then we have like a sort of medium log which is 40, and then obviously the other two are like 70 and like 90. But obviously with the log ladder it was I think it was 30, 35, 40, 46, and obviously where I couldn't do our 40 kilo log, and that was a bit worrying, because obviously if I couldn't do the 40, it's like a bigger diameter, isn't it? Like the standard diameter, as opposed to like the small log. Yeah. And I think actually it had a lot to do with where like I'm like quite short, I'm like 4'11". So when I was like trying to clean the bigger log, it was probably partially to do with the weight of it as well. But I never like, when it rolls up, because my torso is like obviously a lot shorter than like your average person, yeah. I would end up with the handles like this instead of like this. Oh. So I kept like getting up, and then I would just have to like put it back down. I was like, it's just not happening. And then like finally, like it was literally like about 5 days before the comp, I finally got a 40 kilo one here, and I was like, okay, that's it. Like I have to get the 46 one in the log ladder. So when that happened, like I was honestly so happy. I probably could have just left the comp at that point. I was like, okay, like I came here, I did the 46 log. That's kind of all I needed. But yeah, so it was basically like there wasn't like a real reason behind it. It's more that it sounded like fun, so I then signed up and then did it. I was like, actually, I probably want to do more of that. What I did find really hard, and you know how earlier I think I was saying about nutrition wise with Strongwoman, that's what's really pushed me to like eat more, because on comp day as well, where it was, I think it was 6 events, I can't remember, but it was like quite fast paced, which is great. Obviously they were like really keeping on time with everything. But I think after like the 4th or 5th event, like, you know, when suddenly you just crash in terms of you have no energy.
Yeah.
And even though it was one of those things where like I really tried. So the week before that, I was constantly just like eating carbs, eating carbs, eating carbs, eating carbs. Obviously, still like eating protein and like everything else as well. But like I was going really heavy on the carbs, and even that wasn't enough. So, and on the day as well, I was kind of trying to snack in between events, but where it was so quick, there wasn't really a lot of time because obviously you'd finish the first event, a few people would go after you, etc. And then by the time you were sort of like recovered and like ready to go, it was like you had 5 or 10 minutes before the next one. So yeah, definitely like in terms of eating, like I need to do better. Like
I
still
on competition days and between events, I have either a Snickers and a Mars bar, or either one, and a bottle of Coke, and that
oh
and
yeah,
some jelly babies.
I was having like
Usually keeps
I
me
was having
going.
like was having quite a lot of like Coke, and then I think I had like an energy drink and then like just some like sweets and stuff. But I think it was one of those things where obviously everything was kind of like max effort really. So even despite the fact I was still trying to like have some snacks in between, but it was like clearly not enough. So I was like quite happy as well. Well, first of all, like I did all the events, and then even like with the last one, although I was like quite tired, still did quite well. So that was another thing with like sandbag over yoke. I think like I was again like a pretty big disadvantage because with some of the other like novices who were like a lot taller, for them it wasn't like that much of an effort to throw over because it was sort of like weight level, whereas for me it was sort of like above the chest level.
So you have
But
to
even
nearly triple, quadruple extend just to get the sandbag over the
yeah,
bar.
exactly. But to be fair, like I think because it's one of those things where like with the adrenaline, like I ended up like doing quite well. I think I got 6 reps, which was like in a minute. So I was still really happy with that, to be honest. But it is one of those things where obviously there's benefits to being short in terms of, you know, deadlifts and stuff.
Yeah.
But then when you're having to either like load things to a platform or like anything like that, it's like immediately like in terms of if you're like that short, it's, you know, you can still do it, obviously. But yeah, just like basically working harder.
Like I'm 5'6", 5'7", and I struggle sometimes to get things over the bar. Like, and like I wouldn't like. I think for a woman, 5'7's not actually that short either.
Yeah, I'd say like I don't know what the average like height is, but I'd say that's like relatively tall. I don't know.
Yeah, that's not bad anyway. And then that competition you got, is that the one you got 8th out of 11? That's
Yeah,
really that like for your first competition, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I was like quite happy with it. I think especially because with obviously with the novice one where there's like no weight classes, like
Oh, so
you
it
can
was open to every weight category then.
that's
So
why I
that's
was like
even more fantastic then, getting 8th,
that's why I was
because
quite
there's
happy
obviously
with
going to
it.
be taller and like heavier girls than you there competing, so they have some advantage in other events, whereas you know you would basically if weight wise you would just, what's the word, like not experience, but because she's probably all had near enough the same experience, she's real novice, but
Oh yeah, I think it's one of those things like I don't think they had like tons more experience. Although to be fair, a few people actually, and I guess that's where like, you know, with strongman, like you're kind of like a novice until you like place. But there were like a few people who'd already like done comps before.
yeah.
So obviously that like comes into account. But yeah, I think with weight wise, I think obviously I guess to an extent like it can be an advantage, but also for instance there was like a medley. And because like so in the month before that where like I just kind of was doing events all the time, I was actually really working on like sprints. So basically even like it was just literally like getting my cardio up to like as good of a level as possible. So I think that's where like I actually did quite well, because obviously if you're smaller, if you're lighter, etc., and you do a lot of, well, not in general, I don't do a lot of cardio in general, but I did for that comp. So like my medley in terms of both like actually carrying the like implement, but also like sprinting back, I was kind of going like full speed. So that like really made a difference, I feel like. For other events, I think obviously where it's like if it's a static event or if it's like, you know, kind of brute strength, no, like doesn't help. But for running events, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I hated it. In terms of like, yes, go ahead.
Was there a deadlift event in the competition as well? And that one,
Yeah, there was.
And so
yes, it was
going,
axle, I think, for reps.
Going then from like powerlifting deadlift to, because you do it raw obviously, so raw that's literally just a belt, isn't it? And powerlifting, to doing the strong, like on strongman, you can use straps. You can use, well, depending on who organizes the competition, you can use a deadlift suit, and you can use 2 belts if you want to. You can use the neoprene belt, and you can use the hard belt, and then you have the straps, and you can use knee sleeves, whatever you want, basically, like within whatever the rules and regulations are. And you can hinge when you're doing the deadlift as well. You're not allowed to hinge when you're doing powerlifting. So how did you find the deadlift then? The deadlift being different?
So I think obviously like that was like quite a big change, purely because so normally like in the past 2 years, whenever I've like done powerlifting comps, I pretty much mainly do sumo deadlifts. So I obviously had to like switch back to conventional, like kind of overnight really. But I was really happy that actually, I guess that's probably just due to just me doing like, because obviously with pole, like you do a lot of like conditioning and strengthening anyway. But like when I went back to conventionals, they were actually, they had kind of like stayed at the same level, or even like actually gotten better over time, like since the last time I did them. It took like a tiny bit of time to like get used to like axle, because obviously you're sort of like a bit further forward, just purely because of like the thickness of the bar and stuff. And obviously as well the fact that it's like just so like solid, there's literally no like
no give, isn't there not?
Yeah. But it wasn't like thankfully it wasn't crazy hard to like do that. I did actually like, and in the competition I think like 1 or 2 of the like final reps were like slightly hitched, and I was like, oh my god, what am I doing? Like obviously I guess like if it's allowed, it's allowed. So
yeah.
But yeah, it felt really weird, because obviously I naturally like, because with powerlifting obviously you wouldn't get the rep if you hitched it, so you naturally just end up like doing clean reps. But then I guess you might as well, like if you're allowed, you might as well do it. And then yeah, straps was quite good actually, because you don't have to worry about like just dropping the bar.
Yeah
it was actually like a really fun event. 7 reps, something like that, I can't remember exactly, but again it was like, for the way it was I think it was 107. Like I was quite happy with that, just because I didn't have a lot of time to like get back into conventional. It does really, like, I think it's one of those things where like on the day just it really motivates you, like just people like screaming you and stuff. And yeah it went pretty well.
I forgot to ask you,
but yeah, hitching
say that again, sorry. There must be a wee delay, because you're stopping and then I'm talking, and then you I realize you're not finished.
No, I was just saying that like it did feel really unnatural to hitch though, even though it was like for a rep or 2.
So getting back, I didn't even ask you in the powerlifting, what is your max deadlift, squat and bench?
So current ones are, do you mean like in competition, or I guess
well, your best PB, I suppose, or like the highest number you've pulled, even in or out of training, or in or out of oh my god, training or competition.
I get you. Yeah, because for instance, I think normally it doesn't vary that much. The only lift that does vary in terms of what I've done in the gym versus like in comp is I have squatted 120, but up to this day I've only squatted 112 in a comp.
Yeah,
not necessarily so purely because I guess like I only got that 120 like a couple of months ago, so I wasn't really keen on like fully maxing out on like a January comp, but hopefully soon at some point I'll actually get in comp as well. So yeah, 112 in comp, and then bench is 60, and then deadlift is 135 so far in comp as well. So yeah, like it's one of those things where like I do realize it's one of those things where like when I say, oh, I've done this in the gym, etc., and to be fair, it's not that it would have been valid in a comp, but I think it always makes a difference, as in where you do have refs and like they are quite strict, etc. So it doesn't always like mean a lot if you say, oh, I've done this in the gym, because you probably will not get it in comp. So I find it's sometimes good to like specify. So yeah, 120 yes, but not in comp, definitely not.
And have you got numbers in mind for this year for your big comps?
So not too specific really. So I am doing All Englands again this year. Might potentially do Brits again. But yeah, so I haven't actually like it's one of those things where it will just be very dependent on other things, because I am doing like another Strongwoman comp before that. So it's just whether, you know, whether I maintain my lifts or not. But ideally, like I would hope, like I said, so if I do manage to like at some point get a 120 squat in comp, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
And then anything above 60, because I think with bench, so it's literally been one of like the slowest lifts for me, like ever since I started lifting, even though obviously I guess, yeah, to be fair, I started with like literally 25, but it's taken me the longest time to get from 50 to 60. And it's just like a very, very like slow progress. And then
There's
deadlift,
always one, isn't there? There's always one that just progresses
for
slower
sure.
than the other.
But I think the main thing is like I really want to deadlift 140 plus, because like that's kind of been like a number that I wanted to like hit for like the past year or so. But yeah, just didn't get around to doing basically. So yeah, definitely 140, fingers crossed.
Cool. Oh, that actually rounds up all the questions. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we go into the fire questions?
Let me think. Just like about anything or
Anything, yeah.
God, I don't really know. I think it's one of those things where I suppose it's just like I am just really like keen to kind of learn more about Strongwoman, because obviously like it's only been like recently that I got into the sport. So it's one of those things. Yeah, like I can't wait to like actually get like more involved in it. How long have you been doing Strongwoman for?
7 months, going on 8 months maybe. So
Oh,
not
really?
really that long. Yeah, I'm still pretty new. I would still say I'm probably still novice. Until I do this competition in March. I'm doing Ireland's Strongest Woman in March. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, it's good crack.
I think in my head, I don't know why, like I thought you'd been doing it for like a lot longer.
No.
Which, to be fair, like, it doesn't matter either way, but I think, to be fair, like you can take that as a compliment, because like it clearly like looks like you know what you're doing. And
well, I'm glad it looks like it, because sometimes it doesn't feel like I know what I'm doing. I think if it wasn't for like so my husband is one of my coaches. He does all my like technical stuff in the gym, and then I have Terry Hollins as my online coach, so he gives me my programming and my nutrition and stuff. So if it didn't have them to tell me what to do and keep me right, I probably would have given up by now. I've probably had more bad days than good sometimes, but it's getting there. I'm definitely progressing, and I think I'm learning a lot how to deal with it all mentally. It takes a lot of mental strain out of you, because you're lifting heavy and you're not used to it sometimes, so it does get easier.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think like it's one of those sports where you just have to be like just quite like stubborn almost, because even when it gets like quite difficult, you just want to like just get the event finished. And then I guess I think the more you do it, the more confident you get though.
I enjoy doing the events day training more than like the accessory work during the week. Accessory work sometimes just kills me. It can get so boring and repetitive sometimes. It's just you just like to get it done and over with.
No, I completely agree. I think that's kind of what I was saying, you know, when I said that what really appealed to me with Strongwoman is just like how fun it is. But the whole point is, you know, I just want to do the Atlas stones and stuff. And that's kind of like where it started really.
If you could do the events every single day, it would be good crack. But then sometimes if you didn't do the hard work behind the scenes of the events, then you wouldn't really progress too far.
Yeah,
you'd probably stay around the same.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So that takes us to the end of that, I think. Happy enough for that? I'm going to fire questions. This is just for a bit of crack. I've got everybody to do it, so it'll be quite funny whenever the episodes come out to see what everybody's answers are, and everybody will give different answers. So the first one then is your favorite TV program.
Friends.
Favorite film.
Favorite film.
Yeah.
Titanic.
Your favorite band.
3 Days Grace.
Your favorite drink, alcoholic or non-alcoholic?
That would be Bloody Mary.
Your favorite meal.
Favorite what, sorry?
Meal. Your go-to dinner or something, say.
Right. Lasagna.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's nice. Tea or coffee?
Tea, definitely 100%.
Your favorite holiday destination?
Probably Madrid, I'd say.
If you had a bucket list, what would the top 3 things be on it?
Top 3 things. Oh, this is a hard one actually. Wait, so can you repeat the question? Was it like top 3 things that would be
So on your bucket list?
bucket list? All
Yeah.
right. It would be to go on like a road trip in the US, and then obviously hit that 140 plus deadlift, and then go swimming with sharks, let's say.
Rather you than me.
Like, not sure that's gonna happen. Let's like, throw it
I
out
could
there.
do dolphins, definitely not sharks. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Probably night owl.
Favorite superhero?
Ooh, Superwoman.
Your favorite fancy dress? So your favorite Halloween costume? I've asked an American this and they give me an answer I wasn't expecting.
I've done Snow White before. That's the thing, because otherwise I just always default to witch, so I'll say Snow White.
Your favorite day in the gym?
Favorite day? Probably like a Wednesday, really, at the moment.
Your favorite city?
Favorite study?
City?
Sorry, what was that?
Your favorite city?
I don't actually know. I might pass that one.
Your favorite other sport?
Ooh, that would be, I guess, pole. Or do I need to like pick something else?
No, it doesn't matter.
Oh, pole ones, right.
Your best performance, the one you're most proud of?
That would be a few years ago, British uni champs. Because I went from doing like first and second attempt conventional, and then I decided to go for a PB sumo out of nowhere. So yeah, that.
What did you hit?
So I hit, I think it was 125 at the time, but yeah, I was like super happy with it, just purely because I think you don't really do switching like in the middle of a con very often. But I was just like, let's try it. Yeah, worked.
If you're going to try anything new, you may as well do it whenever you're pretty new to the sport too, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Who is your greatest of all time? I have wrote down here Strongwoman, but I've also wrote down like powerlifter.
Oh, okay. Oh God. Let me think. That's gonna take like a second. There's so many good ones. That's the problem.
That's okay.
Oh my God, this is actually hard. I would say probably I am quite impressed by Chloe Brennan at the moment, actually. So let's say Chloe Brennan then.
Yeah, she's a pretty cool girl.
And for powerlifters, that would be Heather O'Connor, because she's like an under 47 and she lifts like 200 plus. I mean, you might actually follow her, to be fair.
I think I do, yeah. Sounds familiar.
Insane.
Cool.
So yeah, these two, I'd say.
It's pretty mad, like for under 47, like that's more than triple her body weight, isn't it?
I think it's just, yeah, because obviously that would be what, like 1, 2, it'd be closer to 4 times. Right? Yeah.
That's
I think
mental weight.
she just clearly has like perfect leverages for deadlifts, I think, especially for sumo. Yeah. But even so, like it's still like ridiculously impressive. Like that's not to like take away from it.
Does she do that raw as well? You'd have to have some grip on you for that, like.
No, I think because you're only allowed normal chalk, so like not even liquid chalk, just powder chalk. So yeah, no, you can't use straps or anything like that.
That's mad. Where was I? Your favorite cheat meal?
Oh, it would be Ben & Jerry's cookie dough, probably.
I love it. The person you most admire?
I mean, to be fair, like obviously as cheesy as it sounds, probably my partner, actually, for like various reasons. But I think it's just the fact, like obviously not just necessarily as a lifter, but as a person as well.
Yeah. Cool. Your favorite animal?
Well, very biased, but like Sphinx cats.
Your favorite event?
Like strongman event or
powerlifting, because you do both.
Yeah, true. I'll probably say Atlas Stones, even though like I'm not amazing at them, but I just think it's like just a lot of fun.
Yeah, and powerlifting. Which one's your favorite?
Powerlifting deadlift, probably because that's my best one.
Cool. Your favorite season of the year?
Definitely summer, 100%.
Yeah.
Just
And
heat and warmth and sun.
yeah, and you can get a suntan. And are you a film or a book person?
Oh, sorry, that cut out. What was that?
A film or a book person?
I think I'm a bit of both. I used to be very much just a book person. I'd say like now it's a bit of both, but let's say book for the sake of like just picking one.
Cool. And that is all the questions done. Thank you very much for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
I had a lovely time. It was really great to chat to you.
Thank you for listening. Now don't forget to subscribe and ring that wee bell. Ding-ling!